And thanks for being here. All
Sure.
right. Well, this is Mr. Salvucci's lunch hour, so we're going to jump right in to our class today on Halloween in the Catholic Liturgy. I have no idea what we're learning today. I'm so excited to learn from you. Mr. Salvucci, if you would like to, you could tell us a little bit about your class that's upcoming at Teach to the Text, and then we can launch into learning about Halloween.
And they dovetail quite nicely, actually, because the class is called America, Course of Empire, Kingdom of Saints. And we're going to be looking at American history through the saints. So we're not going to, talk about the Hawley Smoot tariff and, these various obscure things in American history. Not that that's not important, but we're going to be looking at America, how it developed from the beginning and the challenges that it had, how the saints met those challenges. So you see a picture of St. Kateri there, St. Kateri and the North American martyrs, how when the Europeans came over here, what was the cultural differences and what are the cultural aspects that they had to overcome. And, so we're going to be looking at those two groups and seeing how the saints dealt with those issues. And, through the birth of the early republic, Elizabeth Ann Seton, and we're going to go into, immigration with St. Francis Cabrini, who we just actually moved to a church that she helped found in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And we're also going to look at later on at the end of the course towards the modern with Fulton J. Sheen. Of course, he's not a saint, but we're going to also look at how those saints and how the servants of God and everything affected American history and how they sort of made a kingdom of God in a little bit of an opposition to the course of empire that America has carved out for itself. We're kind of a big country. We're the number one top dog country in the world. But as Rome has taught us and as other civilizations have taught us, this world is not all there is. And then if all we look at is, what success we have in this world, then we're missing the big picture. And we're actually going to start the class in a very unusual way for a history class because we're going to start with a little bit of art appreciation. We're going to be looking at uh, Thomas Cole's paintings. He did 5 paintings called The Course of Empire, which is what the course is named after. And he made a very interesting point in 1830s when the country was still very young, not even 50 years old yet. And he was making a very interesting point about uh, what might happen to the United States if we weren't careful, and what was going to happen because this is the kind of thing that happens to empires that are just built on human effort rather than divine effort and through God and through the church. So it's going to be a little bit of a walk through American history, but we're going to be doing it through the accounts of the saints, and we're going to rely more on what the saints said themselves, what they actually wrote, because I think that's the way that history is best taught. You go to the primary sources and teach the texts, perfect match for that. What the saints themselves actually wrote about and how they confronted some of these issues in American history and how we fit in to the whole program. So that's going to be the new course.
That sounds awesome. I'm so excited. Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. All right. Well, I do have an image here of I think I have a pumpkin that I can put up, but so we can change topics. But I do have your other images ready to go. So if you want to switch to one of those images, just let me know.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the big question that I see online and that people ask me all the time is, can Catholics, and in the larger sense Christians, should we celebrate Halloween? And of course, we know that there's a lot of things about Halloween that we find distasteful. There's too much gore and violence and just some immorality that's just wrapped up in it. And we always have the question, what should a good Catholic do? And we don't really know the answer anymore because unfortunately we've gotten away from our Catholic roots, and we're not sure. I mean, we hear people say, "Oh, it's a pagan holiday. It started as a pagan holiday, and it's not really something for Christians to celebrate." And people are like, "Oh no, well, it's fine. Even if it's a pagan holiday, we can re-Catholicize it, and there's other people that want to embrace the whole thing and not criticize it at all. So I'm going to try to settle the argument today once and for all, because not because through my authority, and I'm not a priest, obviously, and I'm not an authority on Christian holidays or anything, but I think that a very, very important aspect of the church has already decided this. This has already been decided whether we should celebrate Halloween. And the answer is yes, we should celebrate Halloween. Not only should we, but that the church did for probably around 1,000 years. And it's just a matter of how we celebrate Halloween that becomes the issue. Um, so that's the main thesis here. So we're going to look at the first thing I'm going to say is that I'm sure many of you have heard the competing theories about where Halloween comes from. Is it pagan? Is it Christian? What is it? Well, first, I'm not a researcher in this particular area, the history of it and Celtic paganism, but I'm pretty confident in what I'm about to say, in that there is very little evidence from what I've seen in the historical sources that Halloween is based on a pagan holiday. Very little evidence. And the reason I say that is because sometimes it's called a Celtic holiday, which is a little odd to me because the earliest we see the earliest that All Saints Day was celebrated, and I have to bring in All Saints here because Halloween is the vigil of All Saints, so it's connected. The two are connected. All Saints Day was celebrated in Ireland in April originally, in April and May, and it's somewhere in the spring. So what happened was they switched the date to Rome on November 1st, and then the rest of the world kind of followed suit. Rome wasn't interested in Celtic paganism, wasn't interested in Druidism at the time. This would have been about the 500s, 300s. So I can't see really how the Romans would have all of a sudden picked picked an obscure Celtic pagan religion and said, okay, well, we're going to adopt that day. What it seems to have happened is that the Romans adopted it, then the Irish adopted it, and remember, the Irish changed it from April to November, and really to follow Rome. So there may have been some residual Irish pagans that celebrated Samhain, which is the pagan holiday that was supposed to be around there, but I don't think that was the original intent. And I should stress, though, that it doesn't matter whether that was the original intent or not, because the church does this all the time. The Rogation days were from the pagan Robigalia feast. That was, they would sacrifice, I think, a dog to Robus, the god of grain. The church didn't ban the celebration, but what it said was, you know what, we're going to just clean it up. We're going to get rid of the paganism, and then these became the Rogation days. So we're going to, instead of sacrificing a dog to the god, to Robus for our crops, we're going to just pray to God. We're going to have a mass, and we're going to pray to God for the success of our crops. So these became the Rogation days. And even in our time, in I think 1950 or so, the communists were celebrating May Day as their own holiday, a workers' holiday, big communist holiday, and the church and communism were always at loggerheads. So Pope Pius XII decided, hey, you know what? You want a Workers' Day on May 1st? We'll give you a Workers' Day on May 1st. It's not going to be a communist holiday. We're going to call it St. Joseph the Worker. And this is a brand new feast. It's not even 100 years old now. But the church basically just stole their holiday and was like, okay, you want to celebrate workers? We'll celebrate workers. And so it's no skin off anybody's nose to say the church took a pagan feast and Catholicized it. That happens all the time. It's just that I don't think that it is what happened in this particular case. And a good way we can know that is by the name of the feast itself. And we call it in English Halloween. And Ms. Finnegan, you can bring up the first one from the breviary, that first image. This is a translation of the breviary. The breviary is the second part of the liturgy, which most Catholics know that the liturgy is mainly Mass. So we go to Mass, that's the liturgical action. That's the one that we as lay people are most involved with. But there's a whole other half of the liturgy. And the other half of the liturgy is called the breviary or the divine office or the liturgy of hours in the New Rite. It's called all of those things. And the priests, religious, they pray this every day, every day. And it's not something they just say their prayers like on a devotional level like we do. We just say, our favorite prayers that we like to say. No, this is, they pick up a book and the book tells them what to pray. It says, on this day you pray these specific prayers, and it's basically created around the Psalms, but you pray these particular prayers in this particular order, and it's just like the Mass. This is the structure it is, and there's no varying of it. Now, this is a translation of the breviary that was done in 1910 by the Marquis de Bute, and it's in English. The breviary at that time was not translated into English, so it was still in Latin. But he made a translation I don't really know why he did it, actually, but it was this towering work of scholarship he did. He translated the entire divine office as it stood at that time, into English. And I want you to look right there at October 31st, and you'll see it plain as day, Halloween, Eve of the Feast of All the Saints. So this is actually telling every priest, every religious throughout the world in the Roman Rite, which prayers to pray on this day of October 31st, or Halloween. And if you look at the word itself, I want to point out something important about the word itself, because sometimes you'll hear this talk mentioned as the Eve of All Saints, or the Vigil of All Saints. I think it's called Vigilia Omnis Sanctorum in Latin. Halloween is basically a direct, exact translation of the Vigil of All Saints. It comes from hallow, which is the Germanic word for holy. Hallowed be thy name, holy be thy name. We still have that word in English, and in German it's heilige. So it's basically the same word. And the "een" part is a contraction of evening. So basically, Halloween just means the evening of All Hallows Day. It is a direct translation of exactly what the Latin says, the Vigilia, the vigil of all the saints. So when you hear the word Halloween, you should automatically think, well, it's just the vigil of All Saints Day. So because all of this is going to go together. Now, so what's happening here in the liturgy, as we're seeing it in the breviary, people are praying these every day, and throughout October, there's a certain sequence of prayers they say. You see the martyrology on the left, that's October 30th. So every day has its own martyrology, and see, the martyrology always starts with what's going on in the next day, what's going on the next day. So the first thing it says in the martyrology is the morrow is the eve of all the saints. So it's already, the liturgy is telling you there's something special going on tomorrow. It's not just a regular day, which in Catholic circles we call a feria, which is basically a day when there's no specific thing happening. And then, people will have a little bit more freedom in terms of what kind of prayers they can pray, what kind of Mass they can offer. But so the liturgy is already telling you that it's the eve of all the saints. And then October 31st, you see these are the prayers that you are supposed to say, that the religious and the priests are saying on October 31st. And if you look down there, you see matins, so that it has its own lessons, a homily of St. Ambrose, and then it's got there, right before the martyrology, right in the middle of the page there, you see prayer throughout the office. That is the church's official prayer for Halloween. For 1,000 years, that's been the church's official prayer for Halloween. So, of course, it was originally in Latin, and we're going to see an example in Latin in a bit. But that's literally what the church has told people to pray for Halloween, and priests and religious, what it actually made them pray for Halloween for 1,000 years. And so, when it comes to whether we should celebrate Halloween, it's right there in the liturgy. Now, this is the divine office. This is something that, again, the laity really aren't doing so much, because it's reciting the Psalms. Most of us, especially if you have a family, if you're a mom or a dad, you're a kid, it's too much for you. If you're a parent, it's probably this takes hours of the day to recite this. This is really for religious to do. So it's not something that the average layperson was ever going to do. But Ms. Finnegan, if we could switch to the next one, the Mass, the first one from the Mass. This is the Mass of the Vigil of Halloween. So it's called the Vigil of All Saints. This is an American missal. This is from the Licence Missal of 1938. And you'll see there is a Mass for Halloween here. It's the Vigil of All Saints. And it says purple because why? Because it's a vigil day. And that's how we celebrate vigils in the Roman Church. And formerly there were a lot more of them. We're going to get to that in a minute. But it formerly was a purple fasting day before a feast. So we have one good example of this. Holy Week is kind of a weird exception. But we have one good example of this in the Christmas feast. So when we celebrate Christmas, if you go to Mass on Christmas Eve on December 24th, you're going to see it's the Christmas Vigil. And the priest will be vested in purple. And you might think, oh, it's just part of Advent. No, it's not really part of Advent anymore. Now it's its own thing. It's the fast of Christmas Eve. And those of you who may know the Italian tradition of the 7 fishes, why were there 7 fishes on Christmas Eve? It's because it was a fast day. And the reason it was a fast day is because we're preparing for the next day. We're preparing for the huge feast that we're just about to celebrate. So it's a fast day. So there's no meat on a fast day traditionally. So it was like a Friday, if people remember, like fish, like a meatless Friday. People ate fish on Friday, and that's still encouraged, of course. That's exactly what a vigil day was. So you would go into a vigil day and you would be fasting just that last fast before you would get to really celebrate on Easter. So for the Italians on Christmas Eve, for instance, it would be a sort of a penitential day. So they would be fasting and you would have basically one big meal that day. You could have a couple of snacks and then one big meal. So their one big meal would be a really big meal because they were kind of already itching to celebrate Christmas because they had already done 4 weeks of Advent. So like at that point at Christmas Eve, everybody's kind of on pins and needles, and midnight mass, of course, is coming up. So everybody's kind of excited to be celebrating Christmas, but it's not quite Christmas yet. So we're in purple. We're still penitential, but we still want to have a big feast. So we just have a big feast. But it's a meatless feast, so we have 7 fishes, and this is why. This same thing applied to All Saints' Day. All Saints' Day was a big feast, and of course, here in America, it's still a holy day of obligation, so we still have to go to Mass, and it used to have a vigil, and this was the Vigil of All Saints. So the priest would come out in purple, he would say that introit, and that was kind of the introit in the old Mass. For those of you that don't know, the Mass changed a lot in 1970. It changed a lot, actually, a little bit in 1955 and a lot in 1970. So yes, thank you for circling that. But the introit that's the it sets the keynote for the Mass. That's the entrance song that we talk about today. So if you go to a traditional Mass, the introit is very important because it sets the tone for the whole day. And this is the Mass, the introit of the Mass of Halloween. It's the Judicant Sancti Gentes. The saints judge nations and rule over people, and the Lord their God shall reign forever. And you see how it's already seeing All Saints' Day. We're already kind of expecting All Saints' Day. And then the introit kind of sets the tone, and then the official prayer. This is actually the same prayer that we just saw in the last that we just saw in the breviary. So the prayer underneath is the Domine Deus Noster. O Lord our God, multiply thy graces upon us, and grant that joy may follow in the holy praise of those whose glorious festival we anticipate. So, whose glorious festival we anticipate. So, see, we're already we're looking towards that All Saints' Day now. We're there. We're almost there. It's All Saints' Day. But we're not quite there. We're still in that penitential. So we're going to take one day of penance. Now, unlike Christmas, which had Advent was a whole penitential period. We don't have a penitential period for All Saints' Day. We've just had ordinary time or the time after Pentecost when, things are kind of just going along and in the liturgical year. But but we haven't had any penitential preparation for All Saints yet. But the church is like, okay, well, we're just going to take one day out. We're going to give you that little bit of penance. And in the Catholic mind, it's the feast, the fast before the feast. We're going to fast one day, and then we're going to get to celebrate. So this would have also been a penitential day for American Catholics. So for many, many years, American Catholics were fasting on this day of Halloween, of All Saints Day, which is kind of interesting. Like, we don't think about that, but that's the way it was up until about 1955. And that prayer there is the same that was in the breviary. So it's that is the official prayer of Halloween. So it's, if you look at an old missal, you will find that prayer there, and in the breviary, in the old missal there. Now we go to the bottom and we see the Apocalypse, and I kind of like this Apocalypse on this feast because it's a little bit Halloween spooky. You know, it's kind of interesting to me that Halloween, that we see a little bit of the spookiness, and maybe this is where we get some of it in the culture. Um, it's from the Apocalypse of John, or the book of Revelations, and it starts, in those days, behold, I, John, saw in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures, and in the midst of the ancients, a lamb standing as if it were slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent forth into all the earth. And then he talks about all these creatures, and it kind of gets a little weird for a minute, and you're like, is this a mass reading? Is this? But that's the Apocalypse, you see. And this, at this time of the year, what's happening is, if you remember back, we've kind of had, in the church's year, we've kind of been, we've been at the Nativity, we've been with Christ's birth, then Christ's infancy in January, and then we start ascending to Calvary with Septuagesima, or pre-Lent, and Lent. We're in Lent now. We're on the way to Calvary, and then we're standing on Good Friday on Mount Calvary, and then it's the resurrection. And after the resurrection, we celebrate Easter week, and it's glorious. And then we go all the way to the Ascension. I'm sorry. We go to the Ascension, and from the Ascension, then we go to the Pentecost, when the Holy Ghost came upon the apostles. And then after Pentecost, it's that huge green time, or that time of, we call ordinary time, or the time after Pentecost, where we're kind of celebrating the growth of the church. So we're learning how to live as Christians. That's a lot of the Gospels are focused on that, and we're learning to be better Christians, and we're learning about the growth of the church. We're hearing about the saints and everything, but the church is growing and growing and growing, and we're like in the summer of the church, really. And we feel, everything is green and lush, and we're seeing how the church is growing throughout the ages, and it's developing, but the church has to bring us back, though. The church has to bring us back to Advent. And before we can get there, the time after Pentecost, the ordinary time, starts to take on a little bit of a, wait a minute here. It starts to get a little bit of fall coloration, I would say. It's not really in the Missal. We don't see it as much, although we do see it at the end of the year, like with Christ the King and those kind of feasts. But the breviary and everything, they stop quoting from the Sundays of the Mass, and they start to go into the Old Testament books that are very apocalyptic. The ones that are very pointing forward towards the end of the world. And if you see some of in the traditional Latin Mass, which this missal is from, you see the last few masses of the season really start to hammer that home. The end of the world, everything's coming to an end, and just it hammers on you this idea that everything's ending. Okay, and you need to decide which side you're on. Are you going to be a saint, or are you going to be a sinner? You're going to end up upstairs, you're going to end up downstairs, and or if you're going to end up in purgatory, then eventually you're going to go upstairs. You're just taking a diversion. But the church is pointing you towards these two realities, and the Feast of All Saints is part of this. And this is what this vigil is leading us into. It's leading us away from the growth of the church into a kind of expectation of the apocalypse. Like, okay, we're going to start to go through some bad times. Maybe we're going to start to see things that are unpleasant. You know, we start to talk about death. We start to talk about sin and the devils. And Ms. Finnegan, if you could go to the next image, that starts to come in. I think it's in this one. No, it might be in the next one. But yeah, okay. On the communion verse here, in the middle of the page, you see the souls of the just are in the hand of God, and the torment of malice shall not touch them. Non tanget illos tormentum malitiae. You start to see that what the torment of malice. You start to see, you know, the devil kind of nipping in there and coming in and giving a problem for people. So you can actually go back one now. Miss Finnegan. Okay, thank you. So this is all what we're being led to in this glorious feast, and this vigil is really pointing us to that. And we continue with the epistle now, and we see that if you look in the center there, thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God in thy blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation. And this is something that we're going to come up again and again with All Saints, that, you know, this is like the redemption of the entire world, that we're going to see the whole world being redeemed. And this is one of the great things that I think is kind of fortuitous, because it really hasn't been a part of Halloween tradition in the church's life. But Halloween in the United States, as we practice it now, is kind of a new thing. So even though I'm saying that Halloween has been celebrated, the way that we celebrated Halloween is an amalgam of different places. It never really came together in the way that we have done it. So, you know, they would celebrate this vigil in Italy and in Ireland and in Brittany and France and everywhere. There were Catholics, they would celebrate this vigil. But the holiday of Halloween, as we celebrate it today, the secular holiday, is kind of an American creation. It's the first time that everything has really come together in that way, where we have things from different nationalities coming together. So we might have carved pumpkins, for instance. That supposedly comes from an Irish tradition of carving turnips. And the Halloween begging for treats on Halloween, that actually goes back to an old English custom, which was called souling. And what would happen, and this I think is really interesting, is that people would go door to door and they would beg for treats. And the kind of treats, obviously there were you couldn't go and get a Mars bar or, you know, like a Reese's Pieces fun pack in the 1600s. But you could get, like, people would bake their own treats, and the treat that they baked were soul cakes, and there were a thing called soul cakes, and this was typical of this time of year. So people would go door to door and they would beg for a soul cake. And interestingly enough, this is the part of the holiday that the modern America has forgotten. If you're with me up till now, you know, okay, well, that just sounds like trick or treating, and pretty much is trick or treating. However, with an important thing that we've left out in this modern age, is that you would go to a house and beg for a soul cake, and you would say, in turn, the expectation was that you were going to pray for the dead of that household. So then, as now, we believe that our loved ones who have passed on may very well be, or probably going to be, in purgatory and need our prayers. They need our prayers to be liberated, and just in the bond of charity, because we love them. We want to pray for them. We want the best for them. So we want to keep praying for them even after they've left this earth. So this is just a natural thing. So, you know, people would have masses said for their loved ones, and that's all well and good. We still do that. But, you know, never hurt to have other people praying for them too. So, you know, kid would come to your door and say, you know, please, good Mrs. a soul cake, and you would give them a soul cake, and they would pray for the dead of your household. So this is something that really dovetails with the theology of Halloween, that we kind of got it halfway, but not quite. So, and then the modern holiday also has dressing up in costumes, which to me, again, emphasizes this aspect that we just talked about with the Vigil of All Saints. Thou wast slain and hast redeemed to us in God in thy blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation. Okay, so that's like every people on the earth that the God has redeemed his chosen people out of every single nation. So it's not just Israel. It's not just the Egyptians or the Italians or the Irish or the English or the Filipinos. It's everybody. Like God is gathering all of those into his kingdom. So this is where Halloween's dressing up becomes particularly appropriate. And I know a lot of churches do All Hallows Eve parties or All Saints parties where people dress up as saints. Couldn't be more perfect for this, because it's reinforcing that what we are the saints are pulled from every single nation. So when you see this parade of children from every time period, from every nation, and some of them are dressed as American Indians, some of them are dressed in Roman soldiers, and some of them are dressed in medieval monks, or English martyrs of the Reformation, or even modern saints. So you see all of that kind of panoply, all of that image coming out for a Halloween celebration, and it's literally it's exactly portraying what we see in the epistle here. And one more thing I want to call out on this Mass of All Saints Day is the gradual, and I want to show how it's again, like it's very typical of a vigil, that it looks forward to the next day. You see, so the gradual there in the middle of the page. The saints shall rejoice in their glory. In glory, they shall be joyful in their beds. Sing ye to the Lord a new canticle. Let his praise be in the assembly of the saints. Again, we're looking forward to All Saints Day. But what I find particularly nice about this is that it's in the future tense. If those of you who know Latin can see that in the Latin there, the exultabunt, laetabuntur. It's in the future, and it has a double meaning here, because it's kind of referring to us, hopefully, in the future, if we become saints, that we will rejoice with the saints if we become saints. But it's also, because it's the vigil, it's also looking forward to tomorrow, which is All Saints Day. So it's kind of, everything's kind of pointing us in that direction of All Saints. So this is a beautiful thing that the liturgy is kind of doing here. And this is, again, this is the official church's prayer for these days. The breviary and the Mass, these are what the church has prayed for 1,000 years. So, when the question comes up, should we celebrate Halloween? Well, the church has for 1,000 years. It's just a question of how. Lost my win there. Okay, so Ms. Finnegan, can we go to I guess the last one, which is the calendar? Yes. So this is the calendar. This is the calendar taken from the Baltimore Book of Prayers. Some of you may know the Baltimore Catechism. Some of you may have learned from the Baltimore Catechism. That was produced by the American bishops who assembled in Baltimore. They also produced a prayer book, which not many people know about, but which is becoming more popular again, and people are finding out more about it. I think Tan offers it, if I'm not mistaken. But the bishops at Baltimore published the Baltimore Catechism, and they also published a prayer book. And this calendar is from that prayer book. And I want you to notice something about this, that you see All Saints Day, big feast day in red, and it shows that in red in the beginning, and All Souls Day on the second. So pretty much exactly as we all celebrate today. But look at the 3rd, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th of the octave. Now, what was an octave? You may know from the Easter octave and the Christmas octave and the Pentecost octave. An octave is a celebration of a feast that runs after the feast, and it goes on for 8 days. That's why it's called the octave. So it starts from that first day, All Saints Day, and it runs for 8 days. So this, in former times in America, this was celebrated for 8 days, All Saints Day. Now, what you would have for the octave is, so you would have All Saints Day on the 1st, you would have All Souls Day on the 2nd, and then on the 3rd, you would have of the octave. So the Mass and the breviary text would be repeated. So if you went to Mass on November the 3rd, in, let's say, the year 1890 or something, you would see that you would have the Mass of All Saints Day happening again on the 3rd. And then you would have St. Charles Borromeo. Now, that's still really the octave there on the 4th with St. Charles Borromeo. But there's a principle that if there's an important saint, like sometimes they'll bump one of the octave days because that's more important than the octave day. So that's what's happening there. So St. Charles Borromeo, we're taking time to recognize him on that day, but we also would commemorate the octave too. So we would commemorate Charles Borromeo within the octave, is how we would say it. And then the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th, we would be celebrating All Saints Day again and again and again and again. So for 8 days. So this is what the church's liturgy looked like up until 1955. So what, again, you would have the Vigil, which is Halloween. You would have the Saints, All Saints Day, which is the first day, All Souls Day, and then bang, 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 all the way down to the octave day on the 8th. And you would be celebrating All Saints for a week and a day. And actually a little bit, a week and 2 days if my math is right, but don't quote me on that. So it was a big time. It was a big celebration, and it would have been known at the time as Hallowtide, and we kind of use that word still, but now it's kind of been a lot reduced because in the new Mass, in the English Mass that most people go to, it is just all that's left is All Saints Day and All Souls Day, and then on the those are all that's left. And even in the Old Mass, if you go to the Old Mass, I go to the traditional Latin Mass. That missal is from 1962. It's after 1955. So we don't have this octave either, and we don't have the Vigil Day either. So almost no one celebrates these octave days or these Vigil days anymore publicly. Okay, and I want to make sure that we have that distinction publicly. Okay, so if you go to Mass on those days, you will not find All Saints Day Mass repeated. You will not find a Mass for Halloween if you go to your local parish. But you still can find them in a missal. You can find them in old missals. You can find them now. They're all over the internet. I think you can find them now. So if you want to still pray the prayers for that day, if you want to do the readings from that day, nothing's stopping you from doing it. Okay, the church did it for 1,000 years. You can still do it. You can still commemorate it. And one last thing I want to say about the octave is we don't do this in the United States, but I know that in various places throughout the world, I know Ireland does this. During that octave, so between the All Saints Day on the 1st and Octave All Saints at the end, they often have kind of little All Saints Days that are just focusing on their particular region. So Ireland has, and I don't remember the date, it might be that November the 5th or 6th, they celebrate All Saints of Ireland. And it's just like a little, like you parts of the world, and they're not the only ones who do that. There's other places that do it too. They just carve out a little piece of the octave to remember, okay, but we specifically here in Ireland, we also have All Saints of Ireland. So that's a little neat thing that you can do if you want to celebrate the octave. You can have it if you have a particular devotion to the American saints, as I do. That's a good day to celebrate them. So this all changed in 1955. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of liturgical upheaval in the last in that century, in the 20th century, and for some reason they thought, well, the church is celebrating too many octaves, too many vigils, so they persuaded Pius the 12th at the time to get rid of the vigil and get rid of the octave. So they were removed from the calendar in 1955. So unfortunately, we can't celebrate this publicly, and maybe it'll come back someday. I don't know, but it was celebrated for 1,000 years. So again, if you want to celebrate it, I would recommend it. I kind of half do myself. So it's a great thing to do and a great way to get back in the spirit of the holiday. So I don't want to run off too long without taking any questions, and I see some popping up. Ms. Finnegan, should I just start with questions or?
Yeah, thank you. That was interesting. I hope they bring this back.
Me too.
Yeah, it looks like we have a couple questions in the chat. And if you guys have a question, you can raise your hand or you can ask. Know that turn on your camera and be on YouTube. So maybe
So
just
maybe
don't
just
put
don't
too
put
much
too much
press
press
if you don't
if
want
you
to be
don't
on
want to be on
YouTube.
YouTube.
All right, I'll take Daniel's question first. An American creation like our modern Christmas with Santa Claus reindeer. Yes, but even you can make it even more religious than that. So you think of some of the Christmas things that we have. So the Yule log, right? And we think those great hymns of Christmas that I love. That comes out of England. England was where the Yule log came from. England, where those beautiful, beautiful, most of the beautiful hymns. Some of them are from other countries. Silent Night is German, for instance, but a lot of those beautiful hymns come from English tradition, and and that's where that comes from. But the Christmas tree comes from Germany. The Advent wreath comes from Germany, and the presepio, the nativity scene. I think it's kind of more widespread, but it's really like it's thought of as an Italian thing. Like that's a big thing. Like with my family, we always put up the nativity every year because that's a big thing. So what America tends to do is it tends to pull these things from different cultures. And in the case of Christmas, yes, there is the Santa Claus stuff. There is the reindeer, but I think even deeper than that, it's part of our religious tradition. Like no matter how traditional your church is, you're almost certainly going to see Christmas trees, Advent wreaths, and again, these were not part of traditional Catholic observances. These were either German or English traditions, or Italian, or from other countries too, that kind of creep in. And America is really good because we're an immigrant country. We're really good at kind of assembling these little bits and pieces from everywhere else and creating new things out of it. So, and it's the same thing that was happening with Halloween. And Jessica Harvey, how are you? And so she asked, when can we stop the penance of the vigil? Typically, it would go all day, traditionally. Now, again, you're not bound to do this under current canon law, so you can kind of decide what works for you. But if you are observing the traditional fast, you would basically eat one big meal on Halloween, and you could have maybe a couple of snacks to keep up your strength or whatever. But one of the things I think is interesting about this, the meal has to be meatless if you want to keep the fast. But what I think is interesting about this is a lot of the foods we associate with Halloween are meatless anyway. Bobbing for apples, pumpkin pie, candy, and all that stuff. And a lot. I can't think of any meat dish that's associated with Halloween. I was trying to think of this a while ago, and I couldn't think of any. So you're probably good just sticking with traditional Halloween foods. But yeah, it would go the whole day, and then the next day, All Saints. Then you would that the fast would be lifted. Mrs. Salvucci asks, what about the question of can Catholics celebrate Halloween in terms of dressing up and trick or treating? I would say I always let my children do it. I know some people are uncomfortable with it. Again, I think that dressing up, especially if you're dressing up as saints and going out trick or treating, I think it's fine. But if you're going to do that, do it the old way. Have them dress up as saints. Nothing, nothing demonic. Nothing. Not. We're not glorifying blood and gore and evil things. Because that's just not something we do as Catholics. But dress up as something good and wholesome, and you don't even have to ask people to if you want to pray for their dead or whatever. If somebody gives you candy, and go home and pray for get your bag of candy, and if you want, you can pray one, eternal rest grant unto them, O Lord, and may the perpetual light shine upon them for every piece of candy. Now that may be a lot. Maybe you'll say, well, I'll just do 10 eternal rest prayers for everyone. But make it liturgical, make it devotional, make that candy as part of like a little candy rosary or a candy chaplet that you're praying for the deceased of someone else. That gets the spirit of the holiday. I don't think it matters that it's a soul cake or soul cakes sound a little more traditional, sound a little classier than like, okay, this is a Snickers bar, but still, you can do the same thing. No candy on Halloween, Miss Finnegan says. I think you can still have it. If you're not eating meat, then that's your penance. Or you could do that too. You could not have the candy as a penance. So, Jessica asked, does the penance end with evening prayer? I don't believe so. Whatever the rules of a vigil would apply here too. So I assume whatever the rule of the Christmas vigil would be applying here too. But I think it's all day. So it might not end with Vespers because well it probably wouldn't at the time because people would fast. There was a midnight fast until the next day, so they would definitely wouldn't eat after midnight. So maybe they could eat before midnight. I don't know. Daniel says it seems a part of the modern American Halloween celebration borders on the demonic. Yes, we have a couple of like boarded up old hotels around here that they do this haunted house thing, and I've been to one or two of them, and I was always kind of dragged to them, kicking and screaming, and like wandering through it and thinking this is kind of dumb. But if you look at images of hell in the Middle Ages and in the Doré's Divine Comedy and everything, it looks pretty much what they've got going on in those places. I'm just saying. There's like you look at the images of hell and you'll see Doré's illustrations for the Divine Comedy. Somebody's carrying their head and somebody's split open, and there's like people are being tortured, and I'm like, that's what hell is. And I don't, in the Middle Ages, they showed you that to remind you don't want to go there. And I don't mind that we show people and don't, but we have to tell them you don't want to go there. And I think too many people nowadays are like, hey, this is fun, which if you're finding that fun, that it makes me think, what are you at the end of your life? If you have that choice where to go, if you find that more fun than what the saints got going on, then where are you going to end up? So I think it's a dangerous sort of place to put your mind where you start to love that stuff.
Claudio, I'm going to just jump in real quick.
Yes.
I have a little bit of a, I'm going to mute you just so I don't echo. I have a little bit of a theory. I've noticed that in recent years, people have like started calling funerals like celebrations of life instead of funerals. And there just does seem to be in our culture kind of like a refusal to admit that there could be an afterlife and that there could be such a thing as judgment. But it almost seems like as we push that away more and more, Halloween just gets gorier and crazier and more demonic. And it's almost like I loved how you pointed out that the church's liturgical year kind of follows the seasons. And it's almost like everybody wants that in a way. Like even like they almost want to confront death and the possibility of hell, but without admitting what they're doing. I don't know. I just wonder if it's some kind of weird psychological thing that's going on. I'm gonna unmute you now.
Can you hear me? I think you're absolutely right. You know, this is the church is a better psychologist than the entire world put together. I mean, that it just understands human psychology, and it knew that people were afraid of death, and and it didn't want to shelve it. So what did the church do at every requiem mass, at every celebration? I was just telling somebody the other day that remember when the millennium happened, and it was like greatest hits of the millennium. I'm like, what kind of song would have been popular over 1,000 years? From the year 1000 to the year 2000. And I thought, well, it's got to be the Dies Irae, because the Dies Irae was played at every single funeral from the year 1000 to the year 2000. Every single funeral, every single time someone died in the Catholic Church, they heard that song. And that song is so burned into the Western consciousness that you'll find YouTube video after YouTube video of movie directors, The Shining, Star Wars, everything, using the notes from the Dies Irae to symbolize death and destruction, and because the church knew this, and the church, when it faced death, it said, okay, you have to deal with this reality. And I think that we sort of sanitized it, like you said, and oh, it's a celebration of life. It's a celebration, but we shouldn't deny the fact that it hurts. We've tried to sanitize it because we're like, oh, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. No, I don't want to think about my own death. But the church is like, no, see this? This is going to happen to you. There's a saying. You go to a lot of cemeteries in Italy. I'm going to butcher the Italian. Quello che. Well, I'm going to say it in English, but basically that which you are, we once were, and that which we are, you will be. And that's on a lot of cemeteries in Italy. So it's like it stares you in the face, and it's like you have to come to terms with this. And this is what, part of All Saints Day. It's presenting that, it's that dichotomy. It's not just a celebration of the saints. It's also the souls, and this is again, Halloween helps emphasize that, because we see it is a celebration of the saints, but also don't forget that there's holy souls that are suffering, and don't forget, as Halloween says, that there's evil things out there too that can drag you down. Also, okay, so we don't, and I think you're right that it's part of the whole package that we've gotten away from.
Sorry, we got distracted talking about your Ghostbusters in the chat.
That's all right. I'm looking at Daniel's question here. Recently heard a critique of the Catholic funeral mass that it fails to be a celebration of life for the deceased. Of course, the mass is the celebration of the life of Jesus. I haven't looked at the texts of the new rite recently, but that may well be. I mean, that's kind of where the zeitgeist is going. I mean, when you go to the traditional mass, you hear the Dies Irae. It's like, it's very, day of wrath, day of judgment. It's like bang, it's like in your face, and then that melody, da na 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 na. It's really like spooky, and who's it? Kristen Lawrence has a song, like an All Hallows Eve song that she does on her album, and some of her album is a bit goofy, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but she does an All Hallows Eve version with soul cakes and stuff, and soul cake songs, and sure enough, the melody of the Dies Irae is in there. So it's all death, and this is why cemeteries, Halloween, it all goes together. We just have to have it in the frame of mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I know you're in the lunch hour, so I don't want to keep you too long, but thank you so much. I learned so much today, and I hope all of you did as well. And we are really looking forward to the class on American Saints. And
thank you.
We one of these days and celebrate American Saints, on the octave.
Yep. And you can also celebrate the ones who aren't saints yet too. That's a thing I forgot to mention. But
really?
The ones that you think are saints that might not be recognized yet, pray for them privately. Pray to them privately.
Absolutely. Well, I've got a few that I'm praying for. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Salvucci. We really appreciate this class. Thank you for coming, and have a Halloween.
Have a happy and holy Halloween, all of you.
God bless everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.